Hello and welcome back to the TV archive. I'm Tom, joined again by Andrew for 1993. Very interesting year. If you've been following our series, you'll be aware of a few shows that have been popping up quite a lot, and they may or may not be popping up again this year. But
Maybe.
yeah, it's another big year for debuts, I found. Quite a lot of them. I didn't get to a lot of them, but I got to a handful. Um,
Yeah, I'll have some debuts to talk about for sure.
yeah, so for me, as the year as a whole, it's how we always start. I'm just gonna dive straight into it. For me, 93, nowhere near as strong at the top as 92. I think that's kind of where I'm at. But I would say it's about the same level of quality as 91. Um, Where are you at? Do you think it's better than 92, or do you think it's just sort of general same level of quality as we've had throughout the 90s so far?
Well, in the very first year we did, I I hadn't had Twin Peaks to boost it. So for me, it's been at least up until last year, each one was better than the last for me. I feel like this is the first time I can't say that, mainly for the same reasons you said, just the top shelf.
Yeah, I mean, 92 we mentioned was a pretty strong year, even if not for the depth, but just for the stuff that was already going was reaching a real high point. So yeah, we mentioned the debuts. There's quite a few to get through, and this is my shortened list because I had a longer list and I thought, well, I'm not gonna name all these. We got The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., starring Bruce Campbell. Uh, Very sort of cult revered comedy western. Um, you had Homicide: Life on the Street, another one with a big sort of fan base behind it, especially those first three seasons. Laurel Avenue, I believe the first HBO miniseries to win an Emmy. I believe that's the fact about Laurel Avenue. Rocco's Modern Life, Nickelodeon classic, sort of began the working relationship between Stephen Hillenburg and Tom Kenny, which would spawn other things later on. And you also had a lot of sci-fi in this year debuting. You had Babylon 5, you had Star Trek Deep Space Nine, not to mention the X-Files, which is probably the biggest debut we've had since the first year we did. One of the biggest shows of the 90s, certainly maybe the biggest drama of the 90s, you could argue. You could make the argument. And so it's pretty massive. That's joining the catalogue of shows we have at our disposal. And then, as always, I like to mention a bit in the UK, but not so much was going on in the UK this year. The cult show Cracker started this year, sort of procedural kind of drama show. Other than that, in terms of full length series, not much was coming about. I do want to give a shout out to the second Wallace and Gromit short film, The Wrong Trousers, which is a certified British classic. It never gets old. And that came out this year, so that's pretty interesting.
Very nice. Yeah, you touched on a few that would probably be uh, blind spots for better or worse for this list. Especially Homicide, Life on the Street. I've heard good things about Rocko's Modern Life too. It's one of those animated shows that I just never got around to. But
I just realized I forgot a big one actually. That was I did have written down. Frasier as well.
oh, of
Was this
course,
year.
yeah, yeah,
I've got a bit written about it later that it's Frasier season one, and I just completely forgot to mention it. But also Frasier, so a pretty massive year for debuts,
yeah,
really.
for sure. I mean, in terms of like the ratings, I did my usual research, and it's another year of sitcoms at the top of the scripted ladder. Home Improvement is the top show this time, 35 million viewers on average. still unheard of today. And this is also the year that Seinfeld's numbers really start to break out and would stay that way for the remainder of its run. Rounding the list, you got Roseanne, Grace Under Fire, Coach, and then Frasier with a really strong first season showing, probably because it's, of course, the spinoff of Cheers. So yeah, that's pretty much what the picture was like in terms of what people were watching, at least on the state side.
Yeah, and then to just go off into a little bit of an awards tangent, as I tend to do, the outstanding comedy series winner at the Emmys was Frasier, the first season. A bit of an upset over Seinfeld, I think, where Seinfeld had had the upset win the previous year. Now Seinfeld was the one being upset. Um, and then for the second year in a row, Picket Fences wins outstanding drama after winning it for season one previous year, and it wins it again this year, which is a bit surprising. But I guess there's not much competition in terms of drama in the 90s. It's a lot of the big shows are comedies, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like dramas as the decade went on, you start to maybe get some of those more like the marquee ones. I
Yeah,
think.
for sure, for sure. Especially you get into 99, there's a couple debuts that year that really changed television, but
Right.
we'll
Right.
we'll get there. And of the shows that you mentioned, you had a couple like Homicide and Rocko's Modern Life that you hadn't got to. For me, the two ones I actually had Laurel Avenue on my list to check out because it is just two, I think it's two 90-minute episodes. But I ran out of time. And the other one was Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which I did contemplate because big Star Trek fans say that's the best one. But I feel like I do want to watch The Next Generation first, I think.
That's one of
Even though
the catch 22s with like the franchises, right? It's like, where do you start? And if can I start this before I start this?
yeah, so it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. So yeah, I didn't get to that one, unfortunately. I can't remember who went first last time. So do you want to go first?
Sure, why not? We'll try to remember for next time.
Yeah.
I guess should I talk about my honorable mentions missing the cut?
Maybe
Um,
maybe just before the number one, we'll do that.
okay, okay. All right. So my number five um, is one that I believe I had as like a runner-up the year prior. It's Are You Afraid of the Dark, season two. And this is basically like a Canadian kids anthology horror show. You'd have a group of kids meet around a campfire, tell scary stories. They do a really good job at like creeping you out within the confines of like what they could show on like a kids TV channel. I remember always being a bit apprehensive whenever it would go on TV as a kid. There's like an episode that really got under my skin at the time. Uh, and then years later, I ran through the whole thing, and I think it holds up pretty well. Like the highlights, there's an episode about like a midnight movie screening that comes to life, a magic typewriter, and then the one that really scared me, the shiny red bicycle episode where a boy dies, basically on camera, and his friends keep seeing visions of him everywhere. So yeah, some pretty heavy stuff for kids TV, and it's definitely right up my alley in terms of the style of show that it goes for. So, yeah, that's my number five.
Yeah, cool. That's one I'll have to keep an eye for maybe to check out at some point in the future. That's cool though, because you I think last year we had a lot of repeat shows. My list was almost identical to the one the year before. I think it was just that my number four show was different. But I'm mixing up quite a bit this year, and that is partially thanks to all those debuts. My number five is one of those, and it is Cracker Series One. First season of the cult procedural. The first season, each season is consists of three multi-part stories. So it's 7 episodes, but it's the first 2 episodes are one story, if that makes sense. But there are some serialized elements, such as the relationship that Fitz, the lead, has with the different police officers, the sort of the mounting tension of him being brought in over and over again to these cases. At the center of it, you have Robbie Coltrane, who the show ran for 3 series and he won 3 BAFTAs for it. So that's a pretty strong track record. He stars as a criminal psychologist and is absolutely dynamite in the role. Brings such aggression and sourness and but also some tenderness occasionally as well. There's some great sort of dark comedy, but it is very sort of graphic and brutal, especially for British television in the 90s. There's a strong cast of supporting characters and guest stars, and yeah, obviously Coltrane grabs the eye, but you've also got a very young Christopher Eccleston in the cast, and he gets his chance to shine pre Doctor Who, pre The Leftovers, with some real notable acting chops. So it's cool to see him, so young and yeah, Robbie Coltrane before Harry Potter, I guess, is what a lot of people know him for mainly. But for a certain audience, I think this is one of his most iconic roles. And yeah, it was a really good start. I've heard that the second series is a big step up, so I'll be interested to find that out. It gets an average score of 7.7 out of 10, which is pretty solid for the number five spot. So yeah, cracker. Series one.
Very nice. For my number four, uh, so this is one I had, and I didn't have it last year, and I have it back again. It's Rugrats season three. Uh, Not really for any particular reason why it didn't appear on one versus another, just kind of the way it shook out. But by this point, they've kind of smoothed over some of the weirdness, which I like, but it also makes it a bit more accessible now. Some of the more memorable episodes include like uh, Mysterious Mr. Friend, where the Mr. Fiend, where the dad makes like a mechanical toy. He's an inventor, but it malfunctions, and basically the episode is just terrifying the babies with this thing that's supposed to be a plaything. Um, Cuffed, where two of the kids get stuck in like a pair of handcuffs together. Classic little story. Mommy's Little Assets, where Angelica is basically taken to her mom's work and trouble ensues. So I found this was a season that had a lot of like episodes that I really remembered as a kid. So I thought it was good to represent it. Probably for the last time because I think it was a long running show, but after a while, started to wear a bit then, I guess. Yeah, that's Regress season three.
Nice, nice. I'm keeping it going with the debuts. My number four is the X-Files season one. This is where it lands for me. Again, a 7.7 average, but it's a very different story, right? You've got seven episodes in Cracker, three stories. Uh, the X-Files, I think 25 episodes, 24 episodes, 25, something like that. All basically standalone. There's a few sort of that kind of work as a for the larger mythology of the show, but it's a much tougher task with that many episodes to try and make a compelling piece of TV. And it might seem like a low average score. There are people who are diehard fans of this show, and I could definitely see myself becoming that. I think even the less interesting episodes in terms of the writing were elevated by consistently good performances, really good direction, and just great production design in general. And surprisingly, not that many really badly dated effects. I expected more, really. Um, I mean,
It
David
helps when they
Duchovny
go
is,
practical, I'll say.
yeah, yeah. Um, David Duchovny is reliable and effortlessly cool. Perhaps not always totally convincing with the more heavy drama stuff. I think there are a couple episodes where he's going a bit darker with his character and it doesn't quite work as well. And maybe that I only feel that because he's opposite Gillian Anderson, who only seems to get better the more sort of weight there is to the performance that's needed. She really rises to the occasion. She is the star in the making of this show. That is pretty clear to me. And yeah, there's plenty of choice for your favorite episode. I think that's why when you ask someone what their favorite episode, not just of the X-Files, of the first season of the X-Files, you're going to get a lot of different answers. Um, could be any one of seven or eight different episodes, and I think that speaks to the strength of how good it is. I mean, the pilot's great, but it wouldn't be in my sort of five favorite episodes, and a lot of people say that's the best one of the first season. So yeah, it's a really strong start, and I feel like it's only going to get better from here. So Yeah, the X-Files season one, really enjoyed it.
Well, that fits in nicely with my number three because that's also the X-Files season one, and this was a new one for me. Obviously, I'd heard about it like forever. It was a huge pop cultural thing as a kid for me. Just hearing about it. Um, did the little crossover with The Simpsons and stuff, of course. Um, I didn't know for sure what kind of tone it would be like, but it turned out to be mostly, I guess, what I thought. Iconic theme song, of course. Uh, I guess you would call it kind of a mix between like the Outer Limits sci-fi with a police procedural. There's a structure you kind of begin to expect where maybe half the episodes are like these self-contained horror sci-fi stories, and then the other half has more of this kind of like ongoing thread of like government conspiracy. I think it helps because the seasons are long by today's standards of like dramas. So the format switching maybe helps kind of keep it a little bit fresher than maybe if you had all your eggs in one basket. Um, Mulder and Scully, like they bond despite having like the different perspectives in terms of how they might approach the investigation. It works well. I think they have good chemistry. Um, I'd say overall, it's some episodes really stand out above others, which I guess is kind of what you can expect from a show like that. Um, but it's like a solid investigation show in general and well worth the watch for like its best episodes. I think when we were discussing this a little bit before about some of our favorites, and there was some overlap there, but there's quite a few for a first season, quite a few really strong episodes in there.
Yeah, and like I said, from what I've heard, I think the next few seasons might be better. I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what I expect them to either be of a similar level of quality or maybe a bit better. But if it just stays at the level it is, I think it's really good. So that's my number four, your number three. My number three, what could it be? Another debut. It is Homicide: Life on the Street, season one. Based on the source material that would eventually become The Wire. Homicide has a really strong first season that I think sets the stage nicely for the seasons to come that I have not yet seen, but I like where things are going. I think the show's biggest strength is its sort of the depth of its characters and the strong ensemble cast. There's not really a weak link among them. You got your eight detectives and your Lieutenant Giardello, played by Yaphet Kotto, and all of them they maybe don't get equal limelight, but they get a lot of stuff to do, and each of them gets some spotlight, which is great, and you get some surprising guest stars. I know there's more to come on that front, even more notable guests, but even in the first season, you get Edie Falco, pre Carmela Soprano, so that's a pretty interesting performance in there as well. I think the most compelling performance is definitely Andre Braugher. Particularly in the famous three-hander episode Three Men and a Dina, which was recently ranked 25th on Rolling Stone's 100 best TV episodes of all time list. And I think for good reason. It's just sort of endlessly tense, brilliantly acted, just fantastic piece of television, and maybe in the running for my episode of the year. You'll have to continue watching to find out. And even though I don't think any of the other episodes in the first season are even near the standard of that one, it's got a consistently strong vibe. It's all very watchable, and it falls somewhere in between like the Tarantino esque dialogue stylings and something a bit more theatrical and Shakespearean, which is really cool for television at this time. It's got a really unique feel. It's sort of almost Sorkin esque as well at points, long before The West Wing. So yeah, really great. Feels really real. A lot of the interactions and stuff like that was based on Simon's own sort of recollections of spending some time with the Baltimore police. So yeah, it's really good. I've heard that there's some some meddling that goes on by the time you get to maybe the fourth, fifth season that kind of derails the show a bit. But for now, really enjoying it. Only 4 episodes in the second season, so it'd be interesting to see what the average of that is like, considering, it's a lot less episodes to work with, might sort of elevate or bring down the average. But yeah, 7.9 out of 10 for season one of Homicide: Life on the Street. I think it's very strong. And I think there's potential for it to get even better as it goes on.
Yeah, I want to check that out. I'm a big Andre Brower fan too, so that's just another point in its favor. But for now, I got to get to my number two. So far in this series, I've had a repeated winner, and today's going to change that because I've got season five of The Simpsons in second spot. I think the seasons around might be a bit stronger overall. This one establishes a bit more of that kind of like comedy first style gag fest, featuring some of the most like absurd plots up to date of the series at this point, like Homer literally becoming an astronaut, the family having a pet elephant. We still get some of the more grounded episodes too, but maybe it's a little bit more self-referential, a little bit more format bending, expanding a bit further into like beyond the family. Um, Fortunately, the humor is still really top notch, and it's still a great season of TV and a great season of the show. Homer Goes to College is one of my favorites of the show. Cape Fear is pretty much like the definitive Sideshow Bob episode. Great parody. Pretty much classic jokes I could just recall from just about every episode in the season. But overall, there was one other show that I think delivered something a little bit stronger for me this year. So to be continued.
I'm surprised. I thought the Simpsons train was going to keep rolling until like season 9, and you were just going to keep. I mean, second place is still great. It's still great,
Yeah.
but I'm joining you there. Simpsons season 5 is my number two with an 8.1 out of 10 average. I agree with you. I think it's maybe a substantial step down from season 4 is harsh, but I feel like whatever they did after season 4 wasn't going to be as good. That is one of the best seasons of comedy television ever made, in my opinion. Um, I think it lacks episodes. I don't think there's an episode as funny as Marge versus the Monorail, and there isn't an episode as sort of meaningful and gets you in the heartstrings as Homer's Triple Bypass. Um, but there are still some really great episodes here. Like Homer Goes to College is an absolute classic. Marge on the Lamb as a massive Lionel Hutz fan. The A plot is also great, but the Lionel Hutz stuff in that episode is so good. Um, the leap in absurdity does take a while to get used to. And I remember watching Homer's Barbershop Quartet, and that episode is like the jarring, like, oh, okay, continuity doesn't mean anything in this show. There was at least an effort made in the first 4 seasons. Um, but that episode is really funny, which is good because it just breaks everything we thought we knew about quite a few characters and makes no sense. Um, but yeah, it is really funny, and that's kind of how I would sum up season 5. That episode is kind of a microcosm for it in the sense that it's a lot more absurd, it's a lot less meaningful. It is just a joke fest. But when the jokes are as good as they are here, that doesn't matter so much. I do think it's sandwiched between two brilliant seasons, and this one being only great kind of maybe is a detriment to it, but I don't know. It's still part of the golden age of The Simpsons. You got the Box Factory, you got Sideshow Bob's legendary performance on the boat, and you got Marge's irrational hatred of nerds. There's so much to love here. It's just a really lovable season of TV, as all these early Simpsons seasons are. So only gets the silver, but I want to reiterate that The Simpsons season 5 is still great, even if not quite as great as season 4. And before we go into our number ones, do you have any honorable mentions you wanted to shout out?
Yeah, for sure. Like there's a bunch that I've seen that we're still kind of ongoing here. Um, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air season 4 was probably my final cut. I think it has some really strong episodes that season. Home Improvement, which I spoke about before, it's in its third season here. Uh, really popular. Still pretty good, I think. Tales from the Crypt, I think, was declining a bit at this point, so I didn't consider it too much, but it was there. There was a spin-off kids version as well called Tales from the Crypt Keeper that I remember seeing a lot as a kid. Um, Bill Nye the Science Guy was another like thing I remember from my childhood that was uh, a lot of fun actually. We got to see that in school, and it was around at this point too. But at the end of the day, none of them can top the Seinfeld season 5. Um, and I'm not sure I have it above season 4. I think it just speaks to the strength of those two seasons the year prior. But this season goes hand in hand with it to me as the peak of the show, at least. And it's enough to sneak in its way into first tier. It's only fitting that it gets a win after like narrowly missing out the year before. And I think most of the episodes are really great. There's a bunch I would put among highlights of the series. The marine biologist, the opposite, the puffy shirt, the fire. Lots of funny subplots throughout the season. Every character is really established at this point. There's no fatigue in sight either. The writing is well into its style of, this effective thing where you have these seemingly unrelated storylines. Somehow they crescendo together to this final punchline, and it's great. And you get a lot of that in this season. Maybe not the last time I'll be talking about it, though. So let's see what else I have to say later on in this video.
So yeah, Seinfeld gets the win for Andrew. I just have one show I want to shout out as an honorable mention, and that is the first season of Rocco's Modern Life. It wasn't far off making the list, but um, yeah, I think the other shows with the heavier themes and the higher highs really just bump themselves above it. But it's not sort of laugh out loud funny, but it's a really likable show. And there are some really memorable episodes, some fun little capers and stuff. So yeah, definitely a cool show. Interested to see whether it can make a top 5 at any point during its run. Would be interesting. But you may have guessed by now, my number one is also season 5 of Seinfeld, an 8.3 out of 10 average, which is the same as season 4, funnily enough. I find it hard to decide whether I like 4 or 5 more. I probably would give the slight edge to 4. But I think Seinfeld is pretty comfortably my favorite of 93. It's played the bridesmaid so often. It's finally getting its moment in the sun. Um, my favorite episode of the season is The Fire because it has probably my favorite Seinfeld clip up to this point, which is Kramer's bus monologue. Just unbelievable. And George and Jerry's reactions make it even funnier. The fact that they were originally going to also film that scene, but that the audiences they filmed the scene that they included of Kramer explaining it first, and the audience found it so funny that they decided, okay, no, we don't actually need to show it. We'll just have him explain what happened. And yeah, that's way funnier, way funnier. Um, there's plenty of great episodes here, almost no weak spots. The show is really in its stride. Um, all 4 main characters just great chemistry between them. All have their really memorable moments. And I don't think there's an episode quite as note perfect as the contest. Um, but I think the season as a whole makes up for it with a lot of really great episodes. So, yeah, just about gets the edge to beat out The Simpsons. Will it ever do it again? Let's find out in the future years. So, Andrew, what is your episode of the year?
Okay, so uh, I'm going with the Erlenmeyer Flask, which is the finale of the season 1 of the X Files, and there were a lot of great episodes in that season. this one is a really exciting climax, I think, to the mythology that was building throughout the season. I'm not sure like about later, but this is the closest we get up to this point in the series. Basically, a peek behind the curtain of kind of like the government conspiracy that it's been alluded to in certain episodes, and it has some really tense stakes as well involving the mysterious character who we've kind of been introduced to throughout the season, deep throughout, without getting into what specifically happens. It's a very tense um, final standoff there. And there were times in the season where I gravitated towards more to like the monster of the week, but I think this is a great example of how the payoff to the longer narrative really can really make a special element to the show. So yeah, the Erlenmeyer flask.
That's kind of what I meant when I said that you can get so many different answers to your favorite X-Files season one episode. My episode is also from the X-Files. I could have gone with the Erlenmeyer flask. I could have gone with Ice. I could have gone with either Squeeze or Tombs. Both great. But I went with Beyond the Sea, which I think is so compelling and so emotional, but also I love that you're never really given a straight answer as to whether it is supernatural or whether Luther Lee Boggs is just insane or really smart and trying to trick uh trick Scully. You get evidence for both. And you just the ending between Mulder and Scully where they debate that um is so beautiful. Great guest performance by Don S. Davis as Scully's dad. Um, some really freaky stuff, like really freaky stuff with him. If you've seen the episode, you'll know what I mean. Um, Definitely the scariest bit of the whole first season. I thought was that one moment, and of course Brad Dourif as Luther Lee Boggs, unbelievable guest performance. He's always great, but this is one of my favorite performances I've ever seen from him. The scene where Scully marches in and just starts laying it out at him, and he's coming back with it. It's just two excellent actors at the top of their game, and it is an absolute triumph. And one of the best episodes I've seen for these years so far. And I would give an honorable mention to Three Men and Adina from Homicide: Life on the Street as well. I think in another year it could have crept in, but Beyond the Sea gets the win this time. How about performance of the
Right.
year?
Yeah, performance. Yeah, you could have easily given a performance of the year to that episode too. For me, uh, I'm going to take this opportunity to highlight Jason Alexander for performance of the year. Uh, and it's like there's individual moments, but I think there's just several different highlights that really showcase his character. And it's hard to picture how a lot of the Seinfeld stories would be executed without his particular portrayal as like the neurotic George Costanza. And I can't think of a better season to like represent him than I mean, you got the marine biologist speech, you got his aspect of the fire story, uh, and the opposite, which is probably my favorite of the season and one of the funniest concepts involving his character. The idea of going against his instincts and that serving him well, and yeah. So I think just seeing the different ways he's used throughout the season, and I think I can't think of a better year to represent his performance than this one.
Yeah, I easily could have just gone with Brad Dourif for performance of the year, and that's why I'm going to do it. uh, if what I said already didn't explain it, if you've not seen the episode, it's probably one of the ones that does work without having the context, but I wouldn't recommend that because I think being around Scully for the whatever it is, 9, 10 hours before that episode really enriches it, and it just feels like you're unlocking a new layer of the character. And Gillian Anderson is fantastic, but yeah, Brad Dourif gives an absolutely unbelievable performance. And I do want to give an honorable mention to Robbie Coltrane in Cracker as well. He's great. Jason Alexander, it could have easily been him as well. But yeah, Brad Dourif is my winner. Um, there we have it. That's 1993. How are you feeling about 1994?
Well, not to show my hand too much, but I don't think we're losing anything on my radar next time around. And I think between knowing kind of where I know some of these series go and the prospect of new additions as well into the mix, I think it has potential to be maybe the strongest yet if all goes well. No promises, but I have high hopes.
Yeah, just from guesswork, because there's a lot of stuff I've not seen yet, but from in terms of general reception, um, I have sort of put an asterisk next to 94 when we started this series as that could be that could be a crazy year. Because there's already stuff there that I'd seen before starting this project that I really like, which is quite rare in the 90s. It's been a bit of a blind spot for me, hence the time between uploads. But yeah, I can count, I think, three of the shows that I've already watched having seasons that are particularly critically acclaimed in 1994, and shows that I've not seen yet, which I've had recommended to me quite a few times starting in 1994. So I think it's going to be a tasty one. You're not going to want to miss that episode. That's what I'm going to say. But I want to thank Andrew once again for joining me. 1993, we're done. Let us know what your favorite seasons of TV, episodes, performances from 1993 are. And please do tune in next time. I hope you all have a happy Christmas and a happy New Year. And until next time, goodbye.